strongly consider being a part of that. Good morning, church. How are we doing today? It's time for me to dump stuff in my pockets because it annoys me, and I get so easily distracted by myself and my own keys in my pocket. It's really kind of sad. So, good morning indeed. Well, this past weekend is kind of a whirlwind for us. I'll tell you a little bit about it next week. But yesterday and Friday, we spent driving down to San Luis Obispo to take our oldest son, David, back to college. So it's kind of one of those emotional weekends for us, you know. He's not here, he's gone. And we came back last night. We got back last night about 10:30 at night, and we just went in and turned on the light in his empty bedroom. And Holly's like, he's gone, you know. Of course, I made the mistake of saying, just one more year, Stephen's going to be gone too. Which apparently is not the thing to say when mom is missing her youngest, or her firstborn, so. I'm learning slowly. Yeah. So, thankfully, Stephen was there to give her a big hug and hold on to her. You know, I'm like, thank you, Stephen, for saving me there. Yeah. So at any rate, but it was a good trip down to San Luis Obispo, and we traveled out on Friday with all his stuff packed in the van. We spent Saturday driving around looking for used dressers and getting a new mattress for him and all kinds of stuff you need, and grocery shopping. Holly spent what I thought was a lot of money on groceries for him. I think he's one guy, we spent that's a lot of money on groceries. Like, his startup, I gotta take care of my boy. So just making sure he's well fed, and at any rate, it's quite an emotional weekend for us. Today we're in a series here at First Assembly out of Fairfield called Miracles. We looked at a lot of miracles so far. In fact, today I thought about wearing all black today, because here's why. We're going to be talking about an individual who dies, Lazarus, but Jesus brings him back to life. Spoiler alert, I just told you about what's going to happen in the story in case you didn't know it, but you'll see in the Bible text it even says there, Jesus raises Lazarus, so you probably would have figured it out soon enough anyway, so I hope I didn't totally ruin the story for you. But Lazarus dies in the first part of the story. So I thought about wearing black for that kind of, funeral type thing and getting onto that emotionally. But then I looked at the weather. I thought, no way I'm going to wear black all today. It's crazy hot to wear all long sleeve black shirt and black coat and all that stuff. So I didn't. We've looked at a lot of miracles so far. We saw when Jesus turned the water into wine. We looked at the time when he healed a boy, an official's son, from 20 miles away. We watched him feed the masses with just 5 loaves of barley bread and 2 small fish. We saw the moment when he walked on water as well. And if you pause and think about it, each one of those miracles, each one of those events was truly incredible and amazing in its own right. We read them, we've heard them before, oh, that was neat, oh, yeah. But if you think about it, each one of those in and of itself is incredible. Can you imagine being one of the servants there at the wedding at Cana and watching the unexplainable chemical metamorphosis as water transformed in this beautiful, deep, dark, red, fine red wine? Incredible. This is like, look at that. I mean, there's no explanation. Right before their very eyes, just transforms into red wine. How did that happen? It must have been amazing. Can you imagine the family with a boy on the brink of death? Literally, he was dying. There was no way anything could happen. It was beyond saving at this point. Then suddenly he makes a miraculous 180-degree turnaround, and he's healthy just like that, because Jesus, over 20 miles away, said, your son will live. And in that moment, he just turned around. I mean, intravenous antibiotics don't even work that fast. It's just bam, and he's suddenly healed because Jesus said so. He wasn't even there. He didn't even touch him. He didn't pray. He wasn't even in the same room with him. And he just said, your son will live. An amazing record of Jesus healing. Can you imagine what it would have been like with that feast? And you're one of the disciples. You're thinking, we have got nothing, Jesus. This is all we have got. And we borrowed it from a little boy. 5 small pieces of bread, these loaves of bread, and they're barley. Thomas doesn't even like barley. A lot of other people don't either. And these 2 small fish, this is all we got. Then watching thousands and thousands of people fed off of that. The sheer joy and excitement. He's like, this is crazy. It just keeps on coming. they collected more leftovers than they started with. What an incredible miracle that would have been to witness. And can you imagine the unbelievable, the unthinkable, the unimaginable as they're out in the water in this boat and the waves are rising. Then they see the figure of somebody walking on the water and they realize it's Jesus walking on the water. People just don't do that. But Jesus did. Now I wonder, was the water calm where he walked and all the waves are around him, or did he just walk kind of stepping up and down with the waves as he came towards them? I don't know, but it must have been amazing. Truly, this is the Son of God, they said. They realized that miracle. Truly miraculous. Each one of these unexplainable moments is truly amazing in its own right. Each one demonstrates the power of our miracle-working God. Miracles. And they're not just something that are relegated to Bible stories, as we've been talking about. Miracles are something that God does today as well, because God is still the same today as he was yesterday. God has not changed. He's still performing miracles today. They're not something just relegated to the past. Now, let me give you just a quick, important note of theology here, and then we're gonna move on. But obviously, the miracles that we've been talking about are miracles that were performed by Jesus. And the Bible says something about Jesus that is significant to note for today's miracle. First of all, it says he was born of a woman, which means Jesus was fully human being. Now, most people don't question that or deny that. Anybody who knows anything about Jesus or acknowledges that he existed realizes, well, he was human. Obviously, he wasn't a llama. He wasn't a cow. He wasn't just an apparition. He was a human being. People don't question that, but he was born of a woman. But the Bible also says that what was conceived in his mother, Mary, was from the Holy Spirit, conceived of the Holy Spirit. And the Father, when he spoke of Jesus, said, "This is my Son, with whom I am well pleased." Jesus isn't just human, but he's also divine in nature as well. He is the Son of God, or also referred to as God the Son. Fully deity, fully God, fully divine, but also fully human being. Dual nature of Christ, fully human, fully divine. Today, we're going to be looking at a miracle in the Bible, which could be considered greater than all the miracles that Jesus had performed to this point. And you already know what it is, because I've alluded to it or told you flat out what it's going to be. But today's miracle, in many ways, is considered greater than all the ones he's performed before. Walking on water, transforming water into wine, feeding of the 5,000, healing of the boy from 20 miles away. Today tops all of those. And it also shows, as we'll see, both the human nature of Jesus and the divine nature. We'll see that he was a human being. He was fully human with all the emotions and thoughts that a human being deals with, that we deal with on a regular basis. But he was also fully divine because of what he was able to do. There's a book I've referred to from time to time in this series and throughout just life called All the Miracles of the Bible. Locklear is the author of it. And here's what he says about this miracle. He says, to fully expound all the aspects of this great miracle of resurrection found in this story, told with matchless simplicity and fullness by the evangelist, meaning John, the guy who wrote the gospel, told by John himself, to fully expound on all that would require a book in and of itself. In other words, he's saying there's so much theology, there's so much truth, there's so many details, there's so many practical applications that to rightly deal with the miracle of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead, it would require an entire book to comment on all the things that we could learn from this miracle. And so today, we obviously aren't going to be reading through or preaching something the length of a book. We're going to highlight a few things about this incredible account, about this incredible miracle. It's found in the Gospel of John. So if you have your Bibles, turn with me to the 11th chapter, the Gospel of John. John chapter 11. This miracle took place toward the end of Jesus' ministry. Even though it's found in the 11th chapter, it's really right at the tail end of his ministry. in case you hadn't noticed, the Gospels record roughly 3 years of Jesus' life. And they focus a lot on the last part of his life, the last week, the last few weeks. In fact, a good part of each Gospel covers the last couple weeks. And they spend maybe 2/3 covering 3 years of his life and 1/3 covering the last couple weeks of his life because they're so significant. This is kind of that turning point right before the very end of his life. In fact, this miracle took place just a few weeks before Jesus would be turned over to Pontius Pilate and led to the cross. It was just a few weeks before those final moments for Jesus himself. If you're there, we're starting in verse 1 of chapter 11 in John's Gospel. And if you don't have your Bibles with you, you can read on the screen overhead with me. Now, a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." Lord, the one you love is sick. Mary, Martha, and Lazarus were dear friends of Jesus. They were very close friends. This past week, I had a chance to see some friends of mine, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it next week, but we've been friends since high school. And it was amazing to think how many years have passed since then. And we all feel the same, but we look a little different on the outside now than we did back then. At any rate, it was a joy to spend so much time with these close friends that I just know so well, that know me so well. Jesus knew Martha and Mary and Lazarus very well. And they knew Jesus very well. They were dear friends of Jesus. Jesus loved each one of them. They were close. We don't know how many times Jesus may have visited the siblings, Lazarus, Mary, and Martha, at their house. But we do know he had been there before. We do know he had spent time there. Mary was the one who always loved to sit at the feet of Jesus and just listen to his teaching, just caught up, enthralled with the words that he would speak. Martha was the busy one, the one who liked to make sure that everything was lined up and everything was in order, and preoccupied with making sure that her guest felt welcome and all of his needs were attended to. Lazarus was just Lazarus. He was buddy-buddy with Jesus, good friends. So good that Mary and Martha would say, "The one whom you love is sick," because Jesus had a deep love for Lazarus. In fact, when he became ill, Mary and Martha didn't need to even invite Jesus to come do anything about it. They didn't say, "Lazarus is sick, you've got to come and help and heal." They didn't even state that because they knew that Jesus loved Lazarus so much that if he was made aware that the one he loves is sick, well, he would just naturally come anyway. I mean, why wouldn't he? He loves Lazarus so much. All we have to do is say he's sick, and we know that he's going to come immediately and do something. They don't even invite him to come. They just say, "Lord, the one you love is sick." And the invitation is implied by the depth of love that Jesus has for Lazarus. The Bible goes on to say, when Jesus heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death." Now, this wasn't Mary and Martha who gave the message. Other messengers came and told Jesus this, and Jesus responding to them and to all those around him, he says, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Let me read that again. He said, "It is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, "Let's go back to Judea." Now, it seems peculiar. It seems odd that upon hearing that Lazarus was sick, that Jesus would wait 2 more days where he's at before he begins to make the journey towards Judea, the vicinity in which the town of Bethany was found, where his friend Lazarus lay sick. It seems unusual, almost surprising, that Jesus would allow the sickness that Lazarus was experiencing to continue until death occurred. But he did. Remember, he's omniscient. He is fully God, so he knows what's happening. He knows what's taking place while Lazarus' health is continuing to fail and getting worse and worse. He's fully aware, as we'll find out. It seems odd that he would wait. I mean, he'd healed the official's son immediately. He said, Lord, you've got to come. She says, no, actually, I don't. Your son will live. 20 miles away he healed me. He could have done the same thing for Lazarus. It wasn't even that far. He could have done the same. But he stayed where he was. And he waited. And he gives them the reason as well. And they may not have realized it then, but certainly they did later. He says, first of all, this is for God's glory. This sickness is going to result in God receiving glory. Ultimately, it will show people beyond a shadow of a doubt what God is capable of. They will be reminded once again that the Lord is the life giver. They'll be reminded of that important detail. And also, it will result in God's Son being glorified as well. People will realize that Jesus is who he said he is. Jesus is the Son of God. They're going to realize that the power of God resides within Jesus. He is divine as well. Jesus would be so intricately involved in this miracle that people would understand with a greater certainty who he was. And it's important to also realize something. Jesus' delay was not a denial. In fact, you might want to write that down. Jesus' delay was not a denial. See, sometimes when we ask God something in prayer, sometimes he says yes. We love it when that happens, don't we? Sometimes he says no. We don't like it when that happens. We act like a 2-year-old throwing a fit. Why can't I have that cookie? You haven't had dinner yet, and blood sugar is going to spike. You're going to crash. It's not going to be good. But I want it. Sometimes he says, not yet, or not right now. Maybe after dinner you can have dessert, but certainly not before. Sometimes he says yes, sometimes he says no, sometimes he says not right now. It's important for us to remember and realize and see in this narrative that his delay was not a denial. After 2 days of delay, he decided to start heading back and depart. And so he said to his disciples, let's go to Judea. To which the disciples respond, they say this, but Rabbi, which means teacher, but teach. Hey, hold on a second, teach. But Rabbi, they said, a short while ago, the Jews there tried to stone you. And you're going back? Don't you remember, Jesus? They had rocks in their hands, and they were going to hurl them at your head. And you want to go back there? Are you nuts? You want to go back there? And Jesus said, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light. In other words, he's saying, look, I'm walking in the light. I am serving the Father. I am doing the right things. And those who walk in the light, they're not going to stumble. We don't have to fear. We don't have to be afraid of empty threats or what somebody else might do because we're walking in the light. So if you want to be afraid of something, you walk in the darkness. That's scary. You want to know what it's like to be in danger. You walk in the darkness. Then you're in serious danger. But Jesus, we're walking in the light. We don't have anything to fear. After he said this, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him. His disciples respond, but Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get better. And isn't that what you might think as well? He says, hey, Lazarus fell asleep. They're like, well, yeah, sick people, sleep is good. This is good. Let him rest it off, burn off that fever, whatever he's got. He's resting, Jesus. That's a good thing, right? He's probably going to get better, right? Jesus is like, oh, gee, I hate to have to be so blunt, guys. It says Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So Jesus gets as blunt as he can with him. Says, so he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. Come on, guys. He's kind of knocking on their heads. Hey, come on, guys, get it. I was trying to say it nicely for all the people around to say he's fallen asleep. What I really mean is he died. Our friend Lazarus died. It's for your sake, I'm glad I wasn't there, so that you might believe. But let's go to him. And then Thomas says this. Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, let's also go that we may die with him. Don't you just love it when the disciples express sometimes how dim-witted they can be and how just like, what are you thinking, Thomas? Now, it's not that these guys weren't smart. These guys were professionals in their own right, and they were good at what they did. But when it comes to matters of faith, sometimes they just didn't quite get it all. And, I know what that's like. And if you remember maybe becoming a new Christian, you might feel like, look, I am really good at my trade. I am really good at my job. I know what I'm doing. I've been trained through being a journeyman, and I've been training through school. And I've been working for quite some time. I'm really good at what I do. But when it comes to matters of faith, I'm a noob. And I barely know what's in the Bible, and I feel a little awkward, And, well, the disciples were a little bit like that as well. They were smart individuals and experts in their own right in what they did, but sometimes when it came to matters of faith, they just felt like newbies. And they didn't even like for people to know that. And so sometimes they kind of blurt out, and it would sound very newbie-ish. Some of you may not be familiar with that term, newbie, huh? Is that a gaming term that I just kind of picked up? Is that it? Gaming term? Okay. They were novices at this faith stuff. They were wet behind the ears. Is that right? We say they were green at this. They were kind of new to all this faith stuff. Still, even 3 years into it. What Thomas is thinking is he's thinking, they tried to hurl rocks at your head, Jesus. And if you're going back there, you're going to die. They're going to hurl rocks at your head again. But guys, let's go with them. We'll risk our own lives because they're going to kill us too. And Jesus is probably thinking, didn't you just hear what I said about walking in the light and being okay? Didn't you just hear that? I just said it was going to be okay, Thomas. You're acting like you're going to die. When it came to matters of faith, sometimes they just missed it. And sometimes we do too. Sometimes what should be plain and obvious to us leaves us just scratching our heads and trying to figure out what? Because it doesn't fit with what we see as the natural order of things. Because we forget at times that we serve a miracle-working God who can do the incredible, who breaks the mold, who could do things that we thought were impossible or just not natural, he can suddenly do. We realize, oh, that's right. He is God. He's in control. So Jesus tells them as plain as he can, Lazarus is dead. Let's go see him. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in their loss of their brother. Now, there are friends and family who come to mourn, but there are also like professional mourners, people who come at times like this to mourn with them, to help them deal with their grief. And people like that were there. They would weep and they would wail, and they would kind of encourage it to come out of Martha and Mary as well, and all those who experienced a loss. And everybody, the Jews really knew how to experience grief. We fight back the tears, and we get little tissues, we put our dark sunglasses, and we try our best not to cry at funerals. But they just let it all out. They were just a weepy, snotty mess. They just let it out. They bawled. They wept. Yeah, I said it. That's right. Sounded like that. When Martha had heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. And Martha wasn't thinking he's going to be brought back to life. That wasn't really in her worldview. Even though it sounds like, oh, whatever you ask Jesus, I know God's going to grant you. She doesn't really think he's going to come back to life at this point. Because when Jesus says, your brother will rise again, she says, I know he'll rise again in the resurrection at that last day. She says, I know that all those who pass away that know you, Jesus, that there's going to be a resurrection of the bodies at some point, and there's going to be a reuniting of that body with the soul, the spirit that's kind of moved on. I know that when that resurrection happens, he'll rise, and all the people who've passed away before are going to rise. I understand that, Jesus. She's like, you're not getting it, are you, Martha? Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Do you believe this, Martha, that I am the resurrection and I am the life, that whoever believes in me, they're going to live forever. Death is not an issue, not something to be afraid of. Do you believe that, Martha? Yes, Lord. She replied, yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who's come into the world. And here we see how Martha and Mary and Lazarus, before he passed away, they all accepted Jesus as the Messiah when everybody else rejected it. When other people would say, that's over the top, he can't be the Messiah, they believed. And they didn't back down in their belief as to who he was. After she said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. The teacher is here, she said, and he's asking for you. When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to mourn there. Oh, Mary's going off to mourn over the tomb. She's going to weep and wail. Let's go with her. We can mourn and weep and wail with her and experience this grief with her. But she wasn't. She had excitement in her step, in her face. She went to go see Jesus. And a little bit sad, too, because you know when you've lost a loved one and somebody else comes in, you want to embrace them because you know they're experiencing loss as well. If you've ever been to a funeral, you know what that's like. You're there at the funeral and you're waiting, and then somebody else comes in and you see them and you give them a hug and embrace them because you know they're hurting too, and you share that hurt together. They may have thought that she was going for that reason, or she may have been experiencing those emotions as she was running to Jesus. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. The same thought that Martha had. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved. He was deeply moved in his spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. And then one of the shortest verses in the Bible simply says, Jesus wept. Jesus wept. It doesn't say that he got misty-eyed. It doesn't say that a single tear dripped down his face. It says he wept. He cried. He sobbed. He wept for the loss of Lazarus. For the pain that Lazarus had to go through and experience. For the pain that Mary was experiencing with her shoulders shuddering. That Martha was experiencing, and all those around who were weeping and wailing. The pain that they had. Jesus wept. Sometimes love permits pain. Sometimes love permits pain. I remember when my firstborn David was less than 2. And I had to take him down to the doctor for a blood test of some kind, and it was a medical type thing he needed. I don't remember the exact details. I just knew that Holly had to teach that day, and he had an appointment, so I had to be the parent that took my little baby down to the doctor's office. And I sat in that little booth, and I held him on my lap, and he was so happy, having so much fun, just smiling away, sitting with Dad. We're going on a little outing on a trip. And the nurse came and took his hand and poked his finger, and it hurt. And I knew how much it hurt because his smile went away instantly into this frown. And he turned and he looked at me as if to say, "Why would you allow them to do that to me, Dad?" And he cried, and I knew my son was in pain, and that hurt so much. It was just a little prick on the finger, but I felt, oh my goodness, I have allowed you to experience pain, and you had trusted me to keep you from all kinds of pain. You just figured that's what dads do, right? Sometimes love permits pain for the greater good. Sometimes love permits pain for the greater good. When Sarah was an infant, most of you know that she was a preemie. And because she was born so early, there was concern that she might have problems with her eyes. And we had to have them checked out. And Holly had gone through a C-section, so she was unable to exert much strength or energy. And the doctors needed us to hold down our little tiny, fragile baby and pin her down, basically, so they could stick these torture-looking devices in her eyes and force her eyes open with these just metal stretcher things. And it looked awful. It looked like something from the Dark Ages. And I remember, and I had this conversation with Holly, that when I took David down, the deal was I don't have to let our kids experience something like that again, because it was awful. You take the shot. You take them down for shots in the future. I've done that, and it was awful. And now she's saying, I can't hold her down. You have to hold her down so they can do this. I'm thinking, oh, my goodness. My little, tiny, frail baby girl, I have to allow her to go through the experience in this horrible situation and pain. And I did it because sometimes love permits pain for the greater good. Sometimes love permits pain for the greater good. Was it easy for Jesus to allow his dearly loved friend to experience physical death? No, it was not. It broke his heart. Was he omniscient? Did he understand what was going on? Did he know what was going to happen at the end of the day? Did he understand it was for the greater good? Well, yes, he knew that. But did that make it any easier on him? I don't think so. Jesus wept. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him. Look at his heart breaking. Look how much pain Jesus is in." We thought he was just this great miracle worker and teacher, and he's come all the way down here, and he is weeping as well. Look at the depth of the love that this man had for Lazarus. Look at him weep. Truly, he loved him. Jesus wept. Sometimes love permits pain for the greater good. But some of them raise the question, and rightly so. Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind have kept this man from dying? Couldn't he have done something? Jesus once more, deeply moved, came to the tomb. The cave with a stone laid across the entrance. A stone, a large stone. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance, and Jesus said, "Take away the stone. Move it." "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time, there's a bad odor. I don't know if you know this or not, Jesus, but we didn't just put him in there a few minutes ago. It's been 4 days since he's been in there. I think this is why we sometimes miss the incredible nature of this miracle. And it's because we don't understand this. And it's not because we don't understand what 4 days means. It's because we don't understand what death is like in this culture. Because we deny it. We hide from it. We do everything we can to pretend it's not as ugly as it is. We do unusual things to a person when they pass away. We inject them with formaldehyde, and we pretty them up with clothes and jewelry and makeup, and we make it look as if they're just peaceful and asleep. They didn't do that in this culture. And most cultures don't do that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. That's how we just do things in this nature, in this nation. That's how we deal with it. But that also hides us from the reality of death. And without getting too graphic and too morbid, and trust me, it can get pretty graphic. I don't want to go through all the details, but let me just share with you a few things. A body begins to decompose after 4 minutes. After a person has been dead for 4 minutes, the process of decay begins to happen. And again, I won't go into details, but by day 4, these sisters were right. They knew that there would be a horrendous foul odor because their body would be in such a state of decay that it would just be awful looking, awful smelling, and we would know as soon as we open that tomb. That's why there's a big rock in front of it. Jesus is not to keep people out, it's to keep the smell in. By this time, Mary said, there's a bad odor, for he's been in there 4 days. The miracle that Jesus is about to perform was indescribably awesome. Then Jesus said, didn't I tell you that if you believe, you'll see the glory of God? Don't you remember I said that this death isn't going to end in death, the sickness, but there's going to be something greater, that the glory of God is going to be seen and the Son will be glorified as well? So they took away this stone, and Jesus looked up into heaven, and he said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of those standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. What a seemingly odd prayer to say. Father, I'm just saying this so they can hear it, because they need to hear it. And they heard it, and they realized that Jesus is praying, and God's going to do something, and we're in this prayer and hearing it so that we will see something amazing, and so that we will believe that Jesus is who he says he is, that the Father sent him, and he truly is the Son of God. When he said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out, his hands and his feet wrapped in strips of linen and cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, take off those grave clothes and let him go. Jesus didn't revive somebody whose heart had just stopped for a moment and come back to life. Because sometimes that's all we look at this as. We think, oh yeah, people have died and we zap them and they come back to life. Those near-death experiences. It wasn't something like that. It wasn't just a simple revival of somebody who had passed out or somebody whose heart had stopped for 30 seconds. This man had been dead for 4 days. His body was in a state of decay. Jesus took this tissue, which was rotting and smelling bad, and somehow miraculously restored it. The one who created us, the one who breathed life into the dirt, the mud of Adam, breathed life into this rotting corpse, and it became fully alive and vital again. It was truly a miracle on the scale of nothing like anybody had ever seen before. This wasn't some Walking Dead or iZombie or Z Nation corpse walking around. This was a fully healthy human being from somebody who had been in a state of decay, like you might see on one of those shows if you're so inclined to look at that stuff. It defies all medical science that we know. Dead tissue coming alive. You would be surprised at how quickly a human body decays, I have an idea because I find dead mice on my porch all the time. My cat brings them to me. It revealed the glory of God, and it brought glory to the Son as well, as we see in the next verse. Because it's therefore, as a result of this miracle, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and seeing what Jesus did believed in him. They believed in him. They suddenly realized this truly is the Son of God. Look what he can do. It's a miracle. And they put their faith in him. When the Bible says they believed, it means they put their faith in him. As a result of seeing this miracle, when they say it, many people professed Christ as the Messiah. God can raise the dead. God can raise the dead. He can bring life to that which is not alive. He breathes life into things. His Spirit is the breath of life. He is the resurrection and the life. So here's my question for you. I'd like to invite our worship team to come on up as you entertain these questions. So worship team, coming up to the platform, would you? Here's my question. Do you struggle with depression? Do you struggle with having a positive outlook on life? Are you frequently down? Do you find yourself having more down days than up days? Do you feel that the pressures of life have stolen your joy? Do you need someone to revive your spirits? If so, he can do that. He's the resurrection and the life. Do you find that your marriage has dwindled down and it's not quite what it used to be? Do you feel like the flame that once burned bright in your marriage is now just embers that flicker, or maybe even ashes? Do you feel like it needs to be rekindled and set ablaze? Do you feel like it needs life and vitality again? He can do that. He's the resurrection and the life. Do you feel distant from God? Do you feel like your spiritual life is lacking lately and it's not what it once was, or not what you would hope it would be at this point in your walk with the Lord? Do you feel like you need him to breathe life into you as well, to make it vibrant? He can do that. He's the resurrection and the life. Would you please stand? I'd like to invite our